I sat in the mahogany-paneled office, my hands trembling as the lawyer's words echoed in my mind. To my beloved wife, Margaret, I leave the entirety of my estate, including the main house, all investments, and liquid assets. My stepmother's satisfied smile cut through me like a blade. 23 years I'd lived in that house, 23 years of calling it home, believing I belonged there. My father had always promised me I'd inherit something meaningful, that his love for me was real, despite Margaret's constant coldness. However, the lawyer continued, adjusting his glasses, to my son Jake, I leave the old farmhouse on Maple Ridge Road, along with the surrounding 40 acres. Margaret's smile faltered slightly. She'd probably forgotten about Grandpa's old place. The farmhouse. I remembered visiting it as a child, before Grandpa died and it fell into disrepair. It had been abandoned for over a decade, the fields overgrown with weeds, the roof probably leaking, but it was something. It was mine. Margaret stood up, smoothing her designer dress. Well, that's settled then. Jake, I'll need you out of the main house by the end of the week. Her voice was ice cold, no pretense of grief for my father who'd been buried just 3 days ago. I nodded, unable to speak. The lawyer handed me a set of old keys and a deed. As I walked out of that office, I felt the weight of my new reality settling on my shoulders. I had 40 acres of neglected land, a crumbling house, and exactly $300 in my checking account. But I also had something Margaret couldn't take away, my grandfather's old hoe. The one tool my father had specifically mentioned was mine to keep. The drive to Maple Ridge Road felt like traveling back in time. Each mile took me further from the manicured suburbs where I'd grown up and deeper into rural countryside. When I finally pulled up to the farmhouse, my heart sank. The place looked worse than I'd remembered. Paint peeled from the wooden siding like old skin, and several windows were boarded up. The front porch sagged under the weight of neglect, and weeds had claimed what used to be a garden. The 40 acres stretched out behind the house, a sea of wild grass and brambles. I sat in my car for a long moment, engine ticking as it cooled. This was it. This was my inheritance, my fresh start, my punishment. I wasn't sure which. Margaret had made it clear I wasn't welcome at the funeral reception, so I'd driven straight here instead. The front door key stuck in the lock, but eventually gave way with a rusty groan. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight streaming through dirty windows. The furniture was covered in old sheets, like ghosts of better times. But the bones of the house were solid. Hardwood floors beneath the grime, a stone fireplace that just needed cleaning, built-in cabinets that spoke of craftsmanship from another era. In the kitchen, I found my grandfather's old hoe leaning against the back door, exactly where my father said it would be. The wooden handle was smooth from decades of use, the metal blade worn but still sharp. I picked it up, feeling its familiar weight. Outside, I surveyed my domain. 40 acres of possibility, if I could figure out how to unlock it. The soil looked rich beneath all those weeds. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of my story. My first week at the farmhouse was a crash course in reality. The electricity worked, barely, and the well water ran brown for the first 10 minutes, but cleared up eventually. I'd brought what few possessions Margaret had allowed me to take. Mostly clothes, some books, and my laptop. The $300 wouldn't last long, so I needed work immediately. I drove into town and found a job at Henderson's hardware store. Mr. Henderson was a gruff man in his 60s who took pity on me when I explained my situation. The pay was minimum wage, but it was something. "You're Bill's boy," he said, referring to my grandfather. Good man Bill was. Shame what happened to that farm. He hired me on the spot. Every morning, I'd drive the 20 minutes to town, spend 8 hours helping customers and learning about tools I'd never used, then drive home to tackle the farmhouse. Evenings were spent clearing rooms, scrubbing floors, and making lists of everything that needed fixing. The roof leaked in 3 places. The plumbing groaned and wheezed. The electrical system looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1960s. Each problem felt insurmountable on my salary, but I tackled what I could with my own hands. On weekends, I took my grandfather's hoe and began the overwhelming task of clearing the land. I started with a small plot behind the house, maybe a 1/4 acre. The work was backbreaking, chopping through thick weeds, pulling up roots, turning over soil that hadn't been worked in years. But there was something therapeutic about it too. Each swing of the hoe was a strike against my old life, against Margaret's cruelty, against the feeling that I was worthless. With every clod of earth I turned, I was building something new. 2 months into my new life, I was surviving, but barely. My hands were permanently stained with dirt and calloused from the hoe's handle. My back ached constantly, and I'd lost 15 pounds from the physical labor and sparse meals. The hardware store job covered basic expenses, but there was nothing left over for major repairs. I'd managed to patch the worst roof leaks with tar and some old shingles I found in the barn. But winter was coming, and I knew it wouldn't hold. My cleared plot had grown to about 1 acre. I'd planted some late-season vegetables with seeds Mr. Henderson had given me at cost, but it was too late in the year for much success. Still, I had a few tomatoes and some hardy greens growing. It felt like a miracle every time I saw those green shoots pushing through the soil. The loneliness was the hardest part. I'd had friends in my old life, but they were Margaret's world now, and she'd made it clear I wasn't welcome. My phone rarely rang, and when it did, it was usually bill collectors or wrong numbers. One evening, as I sat on the sagging porch eating a dinner of canned soup and store-brand crackers, I wondered if I was fooling myself. Maybe Margaret was right. Maybe I was just a dreamer who'd never amount to anything. The farmhouse felt enormous and empty around me, full of shadows and memories of better times. But then I'd look out at my cleared acre, at the neat rows where my vegetables grew, and I'd remember the satisfaction of working the soil with my grandfather's hoe. This land was mine. Whatever happened, no one could take that away from me. I was building something here, even if I couldn't see what it was yet. By October, I'd found my rhythm. Wake at dawn, tend to my small garden, drive to work, come home and clear more land until dark. The routine was exhausting but comforting. I was getting stronger, both physically and mentally. My vegetable patch had produced more than I'd expected. The tomatoes were particularly good, fat, red, and bursting with flavor. I'd started bringing extras to work, and Mr. Henderson's customers began asking if I had more to sell. "You should set up at the farmer's market," suggested Mrs. Chen, a regular customer who'd bought 3 pounds of my tomatoes. "Saturday mornings in the town square. Betty Morrison runs it. Tell her I sent you." The farmer's market was a revelation. I rented a small table for $10 and sold out of everything I'd brought within 2 hours. $40 profit for vegetables I'd grown myself. It wasn't much, but it felt like winning the lottery. Betty Morrison was a kind woman in her 70s who'd been running the market for 20 years. "Your grandfather used to sell here," she told me. "Best corn in 3 counties. You've got his hands for growing things." I started planning for next year. With my farmer's market earnings, I bought seeds for winter cover crops. Mr. Henderson explained how they'd improve the soil and prevent erosion. I was learning that farming was as much about patience and planning as it was about hard work. The farmhouse was slowly becoming livable too. I'd insulated the worst rooms with old blankets and space heaters. The kitchen was functional, and I'd claimed the small bedroom upstairs as my own. It wasn't much, but it was home. For the first time since my father's death, I felt something that might have been hope. November brought the first frost, and with it, the end of my growing season. I'd managed to clear nearly 3 acres by then, my grandfather's hoe wearing smooth grooves in my palms. The work had become meditation, each swing bringing me closer to some version of peace. My farmer's market earnings had been modest but steady, enough to buy better seeds for spring and some basic tools. I'd also started preserving my vegetables, learning to can tomatoes and pickle cucumbers from YouTube videos watched on my ancient laptop. The farmhouse was ready for winter mostly. I'd weatherproofed what I could and resigned myself to living in essentially 3 rooms: the kitchen, my bedroom, and a small sitting area near the fireplace. The rest of the house would have to wait for better times. One cold Saturday morning at the market, I met Tom Bradley, who farmed 200 acres about 10 miles away. He was a man in his 50s with kind eyes and hands that looked like mine were becoming permanently stained and scarred from honest work. "Heard you're Bill's grandson," he said, examining my late-season squash. "Good man, your grandfather. Taught me everything I know about soil management." He bought everything I had left and invited me to stop by his farm sometime. "Farming's not just about the growing," he told me as he loaded his truck. "It's about the community. We help each other out here. Don't be too proud to ask when you need something." That evening, I sat by my fireplace with a cup of coffee and my grandfather's farming journals, which I'd found in the attic. His neat handwriting detailed decades of plantings, weather patterns, and hard-won wisdom. I was beginning to understand that I wasn't just inheriting land, I was inheriting a legacy. Spring arrived early that year, and with it a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in months. I'd spent the winter planning, reading, and preparing. My seed order was ambitious. I was going to plant 5 acres this year, including a section dedicated to heirloom tomatoes that commanded premium prices at the farmer's market. I was in the middle of preparing my seed beds when I heard a car coming up the long driveway. Visitors were rare. Tom Bradley stopped by occasionally, and Mr. Henderson had come once to see how I was managing. But this was different. The car was expensive, a sleek black sedan that looked out of place on my rutted dirt road. I leaned on my hoe and watched as the car parked near the house. The driver was a woman, probably around my age, with auburn hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She wore jeans and a simple white blouse, but something about her bearing suggested money. Old money, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. She approached me with a confident stride, her eyes taking in the cleared fields, the improved farmhouse, and me in my work clothes, probably looking like exactly what I was. A man who'd been working the soil since dawn. "Are you Jake?" she asked, extending a hand. Her grip was firm, her palm soft but not pampered. "I'm Sarah Whitmore. I've been looking for you." I knew the Whitmore name. Everyone in the county did. They owned the largest farm in the region, plus several businesses in town. Old family, old money, the kind of people who'd never noticed someone like me before. "Looking for me?" I managed, suddenly aware of the dirt under my fingernails and the sweat staining my shirt. She smiled, and something in my chest fluttered unexpectedly. "I have a proposition for you." Sarah Whitmore stood in my kitchen, looking around with genuine interest rather than the disdain I'd expected. I'd hastily made coffee, grateful that I'd at least managed to get the kitchen fully functional over the winter. "This is beautiful," she said, running her hand along the restored countertop. "You've done incredible work here. My grandmother would have loved to see this place brought back to life." "Your grandmother?" "Eleanor Whitmore. She and your grandfather were close friends back in the day, before she married my grandfather." Sarah's cheeks colored slightly. "She used to tell me stories about this farm, about the man who could grow anything and always had time to help his neighbors." I poured coffee into mismatched mugs, my mind racing. "What kind of proposition?" Sarah sat down at my small table, her expression becoming businesslike. "I want to invest in your farm, not buy it," she added quickly, seeing my expression. "Partner with you. I have capital, you have land, and clearly know what you're doing with it." "I don't understand." "Your family has more land than they know what to do with. This isn't about my family. This is about me. She leaned forward, her green eyes intense. "I have a degree in agricultural business that I've never been allowed to use. My father thinks farming is men's work, that I should stick to the administrative side of things, but I want to build something of my own." She pulled out a folder from her bag. "I've been watching what you've accomplished here. The farmers market vendors talk about your produce. Tom Bradley says you're the hardest worker he's ever seen. I want to help you expand." I stared at the papers she'd laid out. Business plans, financial projections, partnership agreements. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you understand what this land means, and because I think we could do something special together." I spent 3 sleepless nights reading through Sarah's proposal. The numbers were staggering. She wanted to invest $50,000 to expand the operation, build a proper greenhouse, upgrade the irrigation system, and plant 15 acres of premium crops. The logical part of my mind screamed that it was too good to be true. Why would someone from one of the wealthiest families in the county want to partner with me? I was nobody, a man who'd been cut out of his own father's will and left with nothing but a hoe and some neglected land. But another part of me, the part that had been growing stronger with each day of hard work, whispered that maybe I'd earned this chance. Maybe the months of back-breaking labor, of learning and planning and refusing to give up, had prepared me for this moment. I called Tom Bradley for advice. "Sarah Whitmore's got a good head on her shoulders," he told me. "Heard her speak at the agricultural extension meetings. She knows her stuff, and she's not like the rest of that family. She actually cares about farming, not just the money it brings in." On Thursday evening, Sarah returned for my answer. I'd spent the day working my land with my grandfather's hoe, thinking about what he would have done. The tool felt lighter in my hands now, an extension of my will rather than a burden. "I have conditions," I told her as we sat on my newly repaired porch. "This stays my land. I make the final decisions about what we grow and how we grow it, and we do this right, sustainable, organic, the way my grandfather would have wanted." Sarah smiled, extending her hand. "Partners?" I shook it, feeling calluses meet smooth skin, 2 different worlds coming together. Partners. The transformation began immediately. Sarah's investment allowed us to hire a crew to build a state-of-the-art greenhouse and install a drip irrigation system across 10 acres. Watching my modest farm become something substantial felt surreal, like stepping into someone else's life. But Sarah insisted on working alongside me, learning the practical side of farming that her business degree hadn't taught her. She showed up every morning in work clothes, ready to get her hands dirty. I taught her to use my grandfather's hoe, showing her the proper technique for breaking up soil and cutting weeds. "It's all in the rhythm," I explained, guiding her movements. "Don't fight the tool, let it do the work." Her hands were soft at first, but within weeks I noticed the beginnings of calluses forming. We worked well together, our different strengths complementing each other. Sarah handled the business side, negotiating with suppliers, developing marketing strategies, managing the books. I focused on the growing, using everything I'd learned from my grandfather's journals and my own hard-won experience. The first major test came when we planted our heirloom tomato crop. Sarah had secured contracts with 3 upscale restaurants in the city, promising them the best tomatoes they'd ever tasted. The pressure was enormous, but the plants thrived under our careful attention. Our partnership was strictly business, but I found myself looking forward to our morning coffee meetings, to the way Sarah's eyes lit up when she talked about expanding into herbs and specialty vegetables. She had vision where I had practical knowledge, ambition where I had patience. One evening, as we walked through the greenhouse checking on seedlings, Sarah stopped and looked around with wonder. "We're really doing this, aren't we? We're building something amazing." I nodded, feeling a pride I'd never experienced before. We were indeed building something special. By midsummer, our farm was thriving beyond our wildest projections. The heirloom tomatoes were everything we'd promised and more. commanding premium prices at both the farmer's market and the restaurants Sarah had courted. We'd expanded to include specialty herbs, unusual varieties of peppers, and a small but profitable flower operation. But somewhere along the way, our partnership had evolved into something deeper. It started with small things, Sarah bringing me coffee exactly how I liked it, me saving the best strawberries for her to taste test. We began staying later in the evenings, talking about everything from farming techniques to our dreams for the future. I learned that Sarah's privileged upbringing had been lonely, that her family's wealth had isolated her from genuine connections. She'd never been allowed to fail, never been permitted to get truly dirty, never experienced the satisfaction of building something with her own hands. "I've never felt as alive as I do here," she told me one evening as we sat on the porch, watching fireflies dance over our fields. "Everything else in my life has been handed to me. This is the first thing I've ever really earned." I understood that feeling completely. The farm had given me purpose, identity, a sense of worth that Margaret's cruelty had nearly destroyed. But Sarah had given me something else, hope that I might be worthy of love, that someone could see value in the man I was becoming. The moment our relationship shifted was subtle but unmistakable. Sarah had cut her hand on a broken greenhouse panel, and as I bandaged it, our eyes met and held. The air between us crackled with possibility. "Jake," she whispered, and I knew that everything was about to change. We kissed there in the greenhouse, surrounded by the green, growing things we'd nurtured together. Our relationship complicated everything and simplified it at the same time. Sarah began staying over more frequently, and the farmhouse felt alive in a way it never had before. We cooked together in the evenings, planned the next season's crops over breakfast, and fell asleep talking about our shared dreams. But not everyone was happy about our partnership, personal or professional. Sarah's father, William Whitmore, made his disapproval clear when he showed up unannounced one morning. "Sarah, this has gone far enough," he said, his expensive suit looking ridiculous in my dusty farmyard. "You're embarrassing the family, playing farmer with this person." I felt the old shame rising, the voice that told me I wasn't good enough, that people like the Whitmores were from a different world. But Sarah stepped closer to me, her hand finding mine. "This isn't playing, Father. This is my life, my choice, my business. Jake and I have built something real here." William's eyes were cold as he looked at me. "What could you possibly offer my daughter? You have nothing. You are nothing." The words hit like physical blows, but before I could respond, Sarah spoke up. "He offers me partnership, respect, and love. Things money can't buy." After William left, Sarah and I sat in silence for a long time. The encounter had shaken us both, forcing us to confront the reality of our different backgrounds. "Are you having second thoughts?" I asked finally. Sarah turned to me, her green eyes fierce. "Never. But I need you to understand something. If we do this, if we build a life together, it won't be easy. My family will never accept you. Never accept us." I thought about everything I'd overcome, everything I'd built with my own hands. "I've never taken the easy path," I told her. "I'm not about to start now." 3 days after William Whitmore's visit, Sarah came to me with tears in her eyes and a manila envelope in her hands. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice shaking. "Something I should have told you months ago." We sat at the kitchen table, where we'd shared so many meals and conversations. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of old letters tied with a faded ribbon. "These are letters between my grandmother Eleanor and your grandfather," she said quietly. "I found them after she died last year. Jake, they were in love, deeply, truly in love." I stared at the letters, recognizing my grandfather's careful handwriting on the envelopes. "But she married your grandfather. Her parents forced the marriage. Your grandfather was just a farmer's son, and my great-grandparents had already arranged her engagement to my grandfather for business reasons. But they never stopped loving each other. Sarah pulled out a letter dated just 2 years before my grandfather's death. In this one, he writes about you, about how proud he was of the man you were becoming, how he hoped someday you'd find the happiness that had been denied to him. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Why are you telling me this now? Because there's more. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. In her will, my grandmother left me a trust fund, a substantial one. She wrote that it was meant to right an old wrong, to help the grandson of the man she'd never stopped loving. The room spun around me. You mean, the money I invested in our farm, it wasn't mine. It was yours. It was always meant to be yours. My grandmother wanted to give your grandfather's legacy the chance to flourish that their love never had. I sat in stunned silence, processing this revelation that changed everything and nothing at all. 1 year later, I stood in the same spot where Sarah had first approached me, but everything had changed. Our farm now encompassed 20 acres of productive land, with a thriving greenhouse operation and a waiting list of restaurants eager for our produce. The farmhouse had been fully restored, its rooms filled with warmth and laughter. Sarah and I had married in the spring, a simple ceremony in the field where we'd first kissed. Tom Bradley had walked her down the aisle, and Betty Morrison from the farmer's market had made our cake. William Whitmore hadn't attended, but Eleanor's trust fund had given us the freedom to build our life without his approval. I still used my grandfather's hoe every day, its worn handle now smooth from both our hands. Sarah had learned to love the tool as much as I did, understanding that it represented more than just farming. It symbolized persistence, hope, and the power of honest work. The irony wasn't lost on me that Margaret's greed had led to my greatest happiness. By cutting me out of my father's will, she'd forced me to discover my own strength, to build something meaningful with my own hands. The inheritance she'd stolen couldn't compare to what I'd gained. As I watched Sarah tend to our latest crop of seedlings, her hands now permanently stained with soil and her face glowing with satisfaction, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From that day when I'd had nothing but a hoe and 40 acres of neglected land, to this moment of abundance and love. Sometimes the greatest treasures come not from what we're given, but from what we build ourselves. And sometimes love finds a way to complete circles that began generations before we were born. Thank you so much for listening to this story about Jake and Sarah's journey from struggle to success. Their tale reminds us that sometimes our greatest setbacks can lead to our most beautiful beginnings. I'd love to hear from you. Please write in the comments what part of the world you're listening from. It's amazing to connect with people from all corners of the globe through these stories. And if you enjoyed Jake and Sarah's story, please consider subscribing to the channel for more heartwarming tales of love, resilience, and second chances. Your support means everything and helps me continue sharing these stories with you. Until next time, remember that every ending can be a new beginning.